Welcome, everybody. Happy Monday. I'm Laura. I run operations for Auggie. And welcome to Setting Boundaries with In-Laws. Auggie is a community, recommendation, marketplace, all in one. And on top of it, we have these wonderful virtual events, and we have an expert panel today with Liz Earnshaw and Whitney Goodman. So without further ado, I'll kick it over to Liz to introduce herself and we will get started. Feel free to put your location in the chat and how many kids you have, how old they are. We really want to keep this supportive and conversational. So yeah, off to you, Liz.
Thank you for having me, Laura. It's so nice to be here. I am Liz Earnshaw. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been practicing for quite a while now. I mostly work with couples. And one of the main issues I work with couples on are issues related to family dynamics and how it can impact their stress levels and their parenting and how connected they feel together. I've also written 2 books, I Want This to Work, and a book called Till Stress Do Us Part. And I'm outside of the Philadelphia area. So I practice in Ardmore, Pennsylvania.
Amazing. All right, and Whitney.
Hi, everyone. I'm Whitney Goodman. I am also a licensed marriage and family therapist. That one is a mouthful. I am a mother of 2 and the author of the book Toxic Positivity. And I also am the founder of Calling Home, which is an online community for adults that are working on their family relationships. I work a lot with family estrangement, particularly when there's estrangement from in-laws or a parent. And so I'm really excited to be here today to hopefully help you guys out.
Amazing. This is going to be such a great conversation. Liz, you work with so many couples navigating those like tricky in-law dynamics. What's one piece of boundary setting advice you think every parent should know?
I think that when you are navigating with a co-parent, that's the lens I'm looking through right now, that what's really important is that you're focused on your relationship together and how you're navigating those boundaries together. I think sometimes one of the biggest missteps people make is that maybe one partner will try to set a limit with a family member, and then the other partner might go back on that limit, or they might not feel the same. And so things can get a little bit messy. And that's where couples start to lose their sense of trust. I don't feel like you have my back. I don't feel like we're on the same side here. And so there's a lot of techniques you can use for boundary setting, but I think what's really important is just at the foundation that you are on the same page with each other and that you figure out who is responsible for the boundary setting with each person.
That's very smart. I feel like that should be a conversation on like date 5 or something, but you never know.
Definitely important to have early.
And Whitney, you literally wrote a book on toxic positivity. How can parents balance setting boundaries without feeling mean or ungrateful or, all those guilty feelings that we get?
I think a lot of us have been conditioned to think that it's mean or that we should feel guilty when we're setting boundaries, right? I find that especially for women, we're more socialized to think that way. Maybe we didn't see our parents do that in their own situations. And so it's important to kind of retrain yourself around that conditioning that me setting boundaries is actually teaching other people how they can best interact with me, how I like to be loved, how I like to be helped. And I think the people that love and care about you and support you, they actually want that information from you so that they can help you and be there for you. And sometimes if we just make that tiny shift in our brain of like, I'm not punishing that person, I'm actually just trying to give them a handbook or a map on how to relate to me, it feels a lot easier to set those boundaries, and they start coming out more as like that type of interaction versus a punishment or a directive that you're giving the other person.
Do you have tips on being like proactive with that? And, I think there are a lot of learning opportunities that we see as, okay, this isn't the time, I'm not going to say anything, but do you feel differently like that is the time or?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of like get ahead of things as much as you possibly can. I think with a lot of situations, because we're anxious about it, we're like, let's just see how it works out. Maybe it'll be fine. I don't need to say anything. But laying the groundwork, let's say like before you have a baby, before there's a wedding, all these big milestones, people have a lot of big expectations and feelings around those moments. And so the sooner I think you can start having those conversations, open up the dialogue, the better. And that way
Yeah.
you give people time to also adjust and you're not reactively putting boundaries in place because we have to do that a lot of the time, but it's not ideal when we get to that point.
Right, right. Okay, so jumping right into everybody's favorite scenario, which would be a surprise visit from your in-laws. They pop in unannounced, the baby's sleeping, it's like your only time by yourself, it's a middle of the day Saturday. Um, Tell me how each of you would handle it and why or what's the reason behind it. So I'll start with you, Liz.
So would you like to know how I would suggest that people handle the drop-in?
Yes.
So first of all, I think that it's really important to every person is unique and every couple is unique. So I don't want to just go at this as that there's like one simplistic answer to that, because there's many couples that might say, we actually really appreciate the drop-in. I wish there was more drop-ins. I work with a lot of couples who are like, if only we could have parents who dropped in and helped us, we would love it. And then I work with other couples who are like, I like drop-ins from this parent, but not from this parent. So first of all, my suggestion is like, do you even know how you both feel about these drop-ins? And are you talking about those types of things with each other? I think it's really important that, let's say your partner's parent does the drop-in and it frustrates you. Can you share that with your partner so that they understand how you're feeling about it first? That way, there's not some disjointed response to it. One of the things that Whitney said earlier, which I thought was really important, is a lot of people are programmed to think that boundaries are like unkind. And so, especially when we try to set boundaries across lines, which means like I try to set a boundary with your mother, not my own, the child of that person might feel like they need to protect their parent. And so they might be fine with the drop in, and then you kind of whip down the steps and say, hey, I would have really appreciated a call. What might happen in that dynamic is your partner, feeling like boundaries are mean, even though they're not, might accidentally come to their parents' rescue in front of you, which will then break some of that really important kind of like we're on the same team barrier that you should feel. So first of all, if these things are coming up, please talk to your partner and decide in advance, like, how do we respond? Is it that I just respond? Is it that you handle your mom? Like, what are we going to do about this? Second thing that I think is important is, like Whitney was talking about, is like getting ahead of these things. So, if not letting, but the person's doing it again and again and again, and nothing has been said, then it's very likely that they just unfortunately assume that it's okay. Whereas if early on you're able to shift out of the mindset of this is mean or I have to be aggressive to say this, and you're able to just gently share, it's so good to see you. It's not going to work today. Could I give you a call after I give the kids a bath? Unfortunately, like just letting the person know what you're actually capable of. The sooner you do that, the better. So that's a long, convoluted response to get on the same page with your partner, understand how you actually feel about it, because not everybody feels the same, and then get ahead of it and try to bring it up in a way that doesn't have to be aggressive. It doesn't have to shame the person. It's just, this is what works for me today, or this is what doesn't work for me today.
Whitney, do you have not a script, but some language that we can all take home from this? I know Liz touched on some of them, but
no, absolutely. And I completely agree with everything Liz said. And I think for some of you here today listening, you're probably like, okay, mine, I can see that it's through the lens of it's well-intentioned. They're showing up just because that's what they thought was normal. And then there are others that I work with that they're like, no, they're doing this as a consistent boundary violation. There's something pathological happening here, and there's all the gray in between, right? And so some different scripts that I might use would be something positive at first. Like, I know you really wanted to see the baby and you're excited, but this time doesn't work for us. Can we do something tomorrow at 2 o'clock, or I will call you when I'm ready to make plans.
Mhm.
So the basic outline of the script is sort of maybe validating what the person wanted from this moment,
Mhm.
telling them that no, it's not going to happen, setting that in stone, and then offering something different if that's what you want to do. Now, there could certainly be situations where this continues to escalate and then you have to set stronger boundaries. But I do think Liz is so spot on that really even knowing what you want to convey and what you're allowing in your home as a
Mhm.
couple and as a family is the first priority.
Do you, I know that I have a couple friends who struggle with like going to their spouse and then the spouse gets very defensive, like, I can't believe you would think my mom would want to hurt us, or, you know, whatever the case may be, where it just automatically starts with a defensive conversation. Do you guys both have any advice for that type of proactive conversation when you know it's going to be met with maybe not total gracious?
Yeah, I think in my experience, it's much easier for an outsider to notice problems in the family
Mhm.
than someone that's been in it for a long time. So you
Yep.
might be noticing things way, way faster than your partner.
Mhm.
And I think you always have to kind of keep that in the back of your mind, also that this is their family. It's much more loaded for them. And you
Mhm.
love and care about this person, likely whether it's as your partner, as the parent of your child. And so approaching it from that lens of more just curiosity, like, hey, have you noticed that this has been going on? What do you make of it? Finding out where they're even starting at before you
Right.
start to come in, because they might be less or more aware than you think.
Mhm.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. When you're bringing up something like this, there's this whole history and relationship and experience that your partner has maybe had with this person, that really colors the review in a pretty significant way, where it's not as easy as saying, like, don't you see that?
Mhm.
Why don't you do something about it? So going in with criticism of the person or your partner is not going to move things forward, even
Right.
if it feels like a good outlet, like you're very upset, so you want to get it out. So
Mhm.
either saying, like, what is wrong with you? Why don't you ever step in when your parent does this? That's not going to help. Or saying, like, what is up with your mom? How don't you see this stuff? Like, your
Mhm.
dad is such a jerk, whatever it is. What you're likely going to get, which is natural, is a defensive reaction to that criticism. It's natural to any criticism, but especially
Mhm.
in family. And so, like Whitney was saying, leading with curiosity is really important. If you were the one that was hurt, so maybe it's not just an observation. Sometimes it might be, did you notice that every time, they come over, they rearrange the house or something like that? But other
Mhm.
times it might be, hey, when your mom was talking to me earlier and she said something about what I was feeding the kids, it actually really hurt my feelings. So it might be more about what your experiences with that person, trying to talk about it from your own point of view. So
Mhm.
the way that I experienced your mom saying that to me hurt me. That's a little harder to argue with, right? Your partner, if you say the way your mom talks to people is so horrible, or the way she talked to me was so horrible, your partner might say, I didn't read it that way. She just talks that way. And truly, it might not be that horrible to them. They're used to it. But if you can
Mhm.
own it from your own perspective, I experienced that as being really hurtful, then it's less likely to elicit defensiveness. Now, on the other side, we have the person receiving the information. So, anyone listening
Mhm.
today, you might be the one who your partner is coming to you and saying, what your dad did earlier really hurt me. It's really important for you to also work on leaning towards curiosity before explanation. And so when I'm working with couples, what they will often do is try to explain their parent,
Mhm.
which makes sense. They're kind of an expert in some ways on their parents. So they'll say, no,
Mhm.
no, my dad didn't mean that. That's just what he does when he gets anxious. When he's in social situations, he kind of drinks because he's a nervous guy and he doesn't mean
Mhm.
it, and da 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 da. But instead of trying to explain your parent in that moment, you can do it later. Just saying, like, I want to hear what happened for you. What was
Mhm.
that like? I'm really sorry that that hurt you. Was there anything that you think would have been helpful from me in those moments? And trying to be your partner's partner instead of your parent's partner. You are not your parent's partner, you're your parent's child. And you have to be very clear about that role.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So many like other questions, but we'll wait to the end. Okay, so talking a little bit about, you get a surprise visit, you handle it, whatever. Then you get to your actual visit and you're getting a ton of unsolicited parenting advice. Your mother-in-law is maybe constantly criticizing your feeding or your sleep method, or, oh, Tommy never took a pacifier, how they sometimes people can just like remember their own thing and they don't realize that they're causing harm. Um, Whitney, what's a reaction that is appropriate, but also like, please don't say that, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think all new mothers go through a period where any suggestion feels really rough, right? I remember
Yes.
feeling that way, that my own mom could say anything to me and I'd be like, I would internalize it as a lack of faith in my abilities, a criticism of what I'm doing. And so I think there's a little bit of filtering for us of like, is this a suggestion? Is it an attack on me? Are they just kind of sharing? And it can be hard to tell what is what, right? And every person is going to show up differently in that area. But I think for you, it's important to kind of work on this filtration system of like, is that something that I really feel like I need to kind of jump back at? Or could I just say, thanks for the advice and move on? That might be easier, right? Now, of course, there are situations where this escalates and it becomes much more critical rather than just giving feedback or telling a story. It's like they're actively telling you, you're not doing a good job and I want you to do this differently. And in those situations, I think there's sort of different levels of ways that you can respond. The most extreme being, of course, like, I do not want advice from you. Please stop making suggestions on this topic. And in reality, you're not going to be able to force them to stop giving you suggestions. So you can make that request. And then in the future, I think have to learn yourself on how to not engage with this person around that topic, learn to brush off whatever they're saying if they don't comply, right? Because we cannot force them. But I think in lesser types of situations where maybe you're just tired of getting feedback from this person, it's very easy to say, like, I really appreciate how much you care. I appreciate that you want to help. And we've decided to do things this way. Or sometimes we're coming up against just generational patterns here of that we're doing things differently now. And so you can say, oh, that's really crazy, or that's cool that you guys did it like that back then. This is how we do things this way now. Or I'd love to teach you. I would love to send you things on it. And sometimes then people will come around. But I have found with a lot of people with in-laws, it's also just about not taking what they say to heart, because some people just want to give feedback and advice all the time.
Yeah, definitely. Liz, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with what Whitney is saying, that it's often like some form of attempting to connect. And so, like Whitney was saying, trying not to take it to heart initially. I think recognizing it as an attempt to connect. When I'm working with couples, I think a lot about bids for connection. So, if you can start to see it, okay, it's a bid for connection. It does not mean I have to do it that way. Sometimes when we're getting really activated by those suggestions, it might be because we're actually feeling not confident in ourselves, which is super common as a new parent. And so you might even want to work on, how do I learn with myself to feel grounded and confident with my own decision making, and also confident with my partner having my back on this. The more that you feel that, the less activated you might get with the advice, because it's like, okay, thank you. I see this as an attempt to connect. I also feel really strongly about how we've decided to feed our kids. And so I'm not shaken by what you said. And therefore I'm able to respond with, I really appreciate how much you love our kids. I know that you want to see them healthy, and we've done a lot of research, and this is the way that we're going to do it. like Whitney was saying, there's different levels though, right? I've worked with, I would say the good majority is this level, actually. It's a bid for connection. It can be annoying. And work on feeling firm about your own stuff and being able to respond through that connection. Sometimes, and this is where it wreaks the most havoc with couples, is it is pathological sometimes. Sometimes there is narcissism under it, there is cruelty under it, and it is relentless. And even if you're a confident person, it's psychologically damaging. And so I've worked with a lot of couples where it isn't just, when my kids were growing up, I would just try to make one pot meals. Like maybe that would help you not feel as overwhelmed. They might give the exact same advice, but there's something cruel about it, and you can, and it's hard to put it on paper, but you can kind of recognize it in the tone, right? So it's not as much, well, when my kids were growing up, we did this. It's more like, well, you seem quite overwhelmed. And maybe it wouldn't be that way if you just learned to not overwhelm yourself with these grandiose meals, something like that. In those moments, what I found is that it actually doesn't really work for you to be the one setting the limit if it's the in-law. What will happen is you will then be scapegoated as the problem new family member.
Yep.
And I'm not saying this is always the case, but when there's pathology, you will be scapegoated. And so the person will say something on paper that seems normal. Why don't you just try it this way? And then you will go and try to say something back to that. I'll use a common one. I don't like when you have a sniffly nose if you hug our kids. And the person will say, it's just allergies. Well, please don't hold the kid. And then they'll go to the family and say, they're so controlling. Like they always try to control the way that this goes. What's wrong with that? They'll go to the spouse. And the worst thing the spouse can do in that moment is to try to placate everybody. You're right, mom. She's just a little anxious about illnesses. And I'm sorry that it went down like that. What needs to happen is the spouse, the child of the parent, needs to be able to go to them and say, I observed, not even I heard, I've observed what you've done. The reason that's important is because you're not then taking an easy way out of, Whitney said to me that you were hurtful and I don't really know what happened, but Whitney said it and I'm on Whitney's side. But I've observed, or I know, or I've seen that when she's trying to keep the kids healthy, or when he's trying to play with the kids, or when she's making dinner, he's cleaning or whatever, that you become very critical, or you don't listen to the boundary. And I want to say that that's not okay with me. I always suggest that you always use we, except in these situations. It actually becomes me in these situations when it's child to parent. When it's other person to other parent, it's we. We've decided we're cooking this way.
Right.
But that's the only thing I would add. Whitney, do you have any thoughts on that? Because you're the in-law queen.
No, I think that that's like perfect and very well said. I agree that especially this part about your partner needing to step in is so important. And I think, Liz, we've talked about this before when we did a podcast together, that it sometimes is not really about it being an in-law problem, but actually a marital issue, right? And a relationship between you and your partner, that if your partner is aligning with their parent, it is much easier for them to put you in the scapegoat role, right? And then you get to be the problem. And that's likely an age-old, issue within that family, that adult child has needed to do that with their parent in order to remain close to them. And that can be a big transition point for that adult child, right? It's like they've never fully differentiated from their parent until they got married. And now their spouse is being blamed for them pulling away or having any type of pushback to what their parent is saying. And it's very destabilizing for that adult child and parent relationship. And I think that's why people get so fixated on these little things, like they're talking about what you're feeding the kids, what they're doing, that it's all power and control in a lot of these dynamics, right? It's like, I want to make sure that I have a say in this. I'm going to see if my kid will align with me. And I think you have to disrupt that dynamic on a bigger level, like what Liz is saying, that it's not just about saying that's what we want to feed our kids, but more that we are in alignment over here. This is a choice that I am making as an adult, and you're not part of this coupling over here that's making the choices as parents. And I think that some people will integrate grandparents into other decision making things, but there has to be very clear boundaries on this is where you do have some power and where you don't. And their child ultimately is the one I think that's going to have to make that stance clear.
Mhm. I see some questions in the chat, so I want to get to those, but piggybacking off of what Liz said about like the, mother-in-law, father-in-law, who what have you, going to the other family members and kind of talking about that person. What advice do you have for everybody on this call about navigating, like, okay, if, let's say your mother-in-law comes and talks poorly about your sister-in-law to you, so you imagine that the same is happening and vice versa. Is that also a spouse, does that end up being a spouse issue, or is that something that like, I don't feel comfortable when you talk to me like that, whatever it is. But I think there's a lot of that goes on when you have the one, daughter-in-law, whoever stands up for themselves.
Whether it's like your own parent coming to kind of gossip about like a sister-in-law, maybe you have a brother who's married to somebody, or it is an in-law, your mother or father-in-law gossiping about somebody your spouse's sibling is married to. You really want to watch out for something called triangulation, which is when people have tension with another person, instead of dealing with it with that other person, they will put that tension onto others. And that will kind of help them deal with it because they're outletting it, but it doesn't change anything. And in fact, it starts to make you a part of the tension, right? And so I don't think that most of the time, you don't have to do anything snazzy to get out of that, right? Like your mother-in-law comes to you and is like, can you believe how so-and-so is navigating their wedding? Isn't it ridiculous? I encourage people just to, like, be simple. You don't need to say, when you say these things, it's really hurtful, da, 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 da. Like the first time you could probably say something like, I just like don't really get involved in that. Or if you like the person, you can say, I honestly really like how they're navigating what they're doing with their wedding. Or have you ever noticed how cold so-and-so is at family events? Like, I haven't noticed how cold they are. I really like them. If you have noticed how cold they are, it becomes tempting to want to say, yeah, I know what's wrong with them.
Right.
I really caution you against that, because it often means that like that in-law might be doing that to you too. There are some times where that's not true. You may have a really close relationship and it might be appropriate to vent. But most of the time, whether you agree or not, just kind of sidestepping it. Like, can you believe how cold they are? Yeah, I don't know. I don't really like to talk about Sarah because it's their marriage. And I think it's really important to stay out of that. And then just move on to another topic. You like the food they have here? Move on to something else.
Yeah, right. I have to go to the bathroom. Bye.
Sorry, my phone just rang. I got to go take a call.
Yeah, right. Do you have anything to add to that, Whitney?
Yeah, the other part I would add, I think Liz is totally spot on, is I think whenever there's any type of like smear campaigns going on within a family of like the mother-in-law is trying to, soil the daughter-in-law's name and is talking to everyone, I think you can feel very compelled to want to fight back against that misinformation, correct everybody's opinion of you, almost start engaging in like a campaign to win these people over. And I usually caution against that. I think it's better to just behave the way that you would like to be perceived. And when people are committed to misunderstanding you and engaging in these things, a lot of people will see that behavior for what it is, healthy people. And so exactly what Liz was just describing is, people will eventually catch on, all the people on the receiving end of that information, be like, wow, she talks a lot about so-and-so. And some people might believe it because they want to be part of that, belief system or that circle. And others might really start to notice that the way she speaks about Sarah is not consistent with the interactions that I've had with her. And I find that that can be a lot stronger than you trying to call people up and like defend your name and engage in that. But it's very hard to know that people in your family are speaking about you in a way that is not consistent with how you are, especially in-laws who seem very like hell-bent on excluding you from the family or even ruining your marriage to some degree.
Right. Yeah, so hard. Okay, so there was a question in the chat. What do you do when your partner agrees with you on how their parent treats you, but he himself has dealt with them his whole life and it upsets him because he, of course, can't change his parent and control things about them. So instead, I'm met with, you have to just ignore her, don't respond anymore, etc.
I think, okay, so I believe that you are not required to respond to your partner's parents in the same way that they have chosen to. And sometimes they will want you to do that because that's going to maintain the status quo that they have found like safety in the relationship through that and through the family. But you're a different person, you have different boundaries, different needs. And while it's important to remain a united front, I think it's also okay for you to have your own boundaries. So I have certainly worked with families where the son of the parents or the daughter has decided to maintain a relationship with the parents that includes seeing them on holidays, talking to them on the phone, and their spouse does not attend those events because when they do, they're treated poorly. It's not a good dynamic, and that's what they've decided to do. And so I think it is okay for you to say, this is what I'm okay with. I know, I understand that that's comfortable for you, but it's not for me. And sometimes a relationship can't handle that level of disagreement and some can. There's so many shades of gray there, but I think for you it's about really having some confidence in yourself of like, no, I'm allowed to make my own decisions about how I feel about how these people are treating me. Just because they're my in-laws doesn't mean that I have to accept all the same behavior, that my spouse does. Now, much easier said than done, right? And how you decide to navigate that within your actual marriage.
Yeah, I think that just like Whitney said, you're a separate person. So you're a differentiated person, right? And often times in families, like your partner might not be fully differentiated from his parent yet. And so there's a lot of kind of I have to ignore because I'm afraid of the conflict, like their feelings are going to impact how I feel. So it makes sense in some ways, not saying that it's right, but that's how your partner is responding. And it doesn't mean you have to. At the same time, I also suggest taking some wisdom from your partner, like based off of the type of life you might want to live. Like if your partner knows, look, approaching this person on the topic might cause them to like scream at us at the birthday party. I don't know that we want that. You can still respond how you want to respond, and you might want to take some of their wisdom based off of the life you and your partner want to live together. Sometimes the in-laws become too much of a focus. It's like they're upsetting, and how do we change them, and how do we do all of this? And you like lose sight of actually the life we want to live is one that's low chaos. And so if low chaos means that I just don't talk to this person, then great. On the other hand, when I'm looking at this question, I would really want to work with your partner, because I think he would need to be able to recognize that it's great that he agrees with you, right? That it says he agrees on how they see it. They see how they're treating. That's great. But then he says, but I can't change them. And sometimes couples get really stuck here because they think that becoming a united front over these issues is about changing their parent. And that's not it. And so they get in this like mess where it's like, well, what do you want me to do? I can't get them to change how they talk about things. I can't get them to be different. And you want something from me that I can't do for you. And I would love for, if this is a gridlock for the two of you, for that to be able to shift to like, of course you can't change this person. What are the other things you can do to help me feel supported? I know that you can't change this person. And there's something in our marriage around this issue that's making me not feel supported, whether it's you telling me just to ignore them, or you kind of watering down what the issue is, or you not having the direct conversations on our behalf. Like you can't change them, but what can you do for yourself that creates some more safety and security and support in this relationship? And so I would want to work with him on like, what would you need so that you could feel confident that maybe your partner maybe can ignore them, but maybe you need to have a conversation. Or maybe you just need to learn to listen and not just give advice like just ignore them, and instead be able to say, I know it's really hard. So sorry you have to deal with this. This really stinks. Like, what do you want us to do together? So yeah, that's my long answer to that.
Yeah. No, very, very insightful. I feel like I'm hearing that like validating someone is the key to like getting into the good conversations, but it's so hard to do that in the moment. I think we all are like, no, I'm right. And I'm not going to tell
Yeah.
you that, but that's a hard thing,
And
but
on
maybe
both
something.
sides, right? Like you can validate, I get why you want me to ignore them, because I know historically when you don't, you grew up with somebody that would then like cut off your car insurance payments if you fought back. So like, of
Right.
course, and we're in a different place now and I can't ignore it. And like, I want you to be able to hear that from me. You can ignore it and I need to do X, Y, and Z, or I need you to step in, right? Because this is your family.
Right. So a similar question. My mother-in-law repeatedly makes passive comments about how we decided to vaccinate our child and my choice to breastfeed. We have told her that this is our boundary, but she continues with passive comments like, I had the measles and I was fine without the vaccine. This is extremely upsetting. My partner chooses to ignore it, but I cannot. So similar, but more specific.
So with situations like these, I'm always curious about like what is the other person wanting to happen from these comments, right? So it sounds like maybe your mother-in-law wants you to, if you've already vaccinated the child, it's like there's nothing else that can really happen here after these comments. So I am a big fan of like gray rocking almost in situations like this. Like, oh, I'm glad that you were okay after you had the measles, or that's interesting. Thanks for letting us know, things like that, that I would want to get at the core of also like what makes it really hard to ignore. Why is it uncomfortable when she says things like that? And sometimes I think what Liz was getting at before also is like we want our partners to stand up for us in these moments sometimes because that would make us feel chosen. Or like they're aligning with us. And could that just be something that's going on in other areas of the relationship that maybe you're looking at this as a place for that to play out and resolve that? That I think that's mainly where I would revert back to is kind of like, what is this bringing up for me? What am I hoping will happen? Because she does not really have any power in this situation other than making her comments. Right. And so I would want to definitely go deeper on that. I don't know, Liz, if you have any more concrete strategies for that one.
I agree with everything you say. I think that like what is it underneath all of that that's trying to be conveyed? Are you able to just respond with like, I'm glad you never got measles. This is just the decision that we made. And again, work on like taking deep breaths and feeling really grounded that you and your partner have made a good decision. And like Whitney was talking about, it's often about the marriage when these things become really upsetting. And I'm not saying that the marriage is bad, but there's maybe a desire that you don't even have to be the one dealing with that anymore, right? That your partner would be able to step in and say, hey, like, we've made the decision, we're happy or not happy, whatever, to hear about your own life experiences. And like, we're not changing our minds, so you have to stop with the vaccine advice. Is it that you need your partner to do that because that creates a sense of trust and commitment? And often these things, when your partner isn't doing those things, it will create a sense of like lost trust, because there's the feeling of, you don't have my back. Trust is about the belief that somebody has your back and they care about your well-being. And so I'm just wondering if in this case, yes, your partner is choosing to ignore it and that might work for them, but perhaps what is really needed is that your partner doesn't ignore it and is able to lean forward, even though it's hard, and say, this is like really upsetting. We've made this decision and it just can't be brought up again. And if you need to bring it up again, do not do it to my partner. Just do not bring it up, because it's becoming frustrating. That way you're not the one having to constantly deal with that and probably be scapegoated through it.
Yeah, really good advice. So similarly, talking a little bit about, culture, generational differences, like the vaccine stuff. Your in-laws have completely different culture, generational approaches to parenting. I know there's a lot of like funny footage on Instagram and TikTok that's like trying to get my boomer parent to gentle parent, which is it's funny, but it also is like it's very different, and it's very scary how different it is. Do you guys have advice for finding common ground, and kind of like, even if you're pregnant, like being able to be like, just a heads up, is that something you have to do, or what's your advice there?
I am a big believer that culture is something that should be a positive force in anyone's life, right? It's something that should be inspirational, uniting. It should bring positivity to the family. And I think a lot of times culture is used as like a word to keep certain practices happening in a family that are actually very harmful to certain members of the family, or they're punishing, or they're a way to like assert control. And so I think it's very important as a couple or as a parent to kind of think, okay, is this a cultural practice in our family that we want to keep? We want to maintain? Does it make us feel good? Is it in line with our values? And you might actually find that some of them you do want to keep and you want to change them, make them a little bit different. And some of them you're going to let go of. And from like an empathetic perspective, I think we have to remember that a lot of generations of families did not necessarily have that level of choice that we have now, in terms of like what traditions they were going to keep and what type of cultural elements they were going to keep. We're also having a lot more intermarriage these days between races, religion, ethnicities, that it can get dicey. And so there is a little bit of caution that has to enter in these conversations, because traditions are important. And I think we can always come from that angle. And it's okay to say that cultural influence, that tradition does not fit in our family. We love that it was important to you and that it felt good for you, but that's not something that we are going to include. I do think these conversations should happen between couples, especially before they have children, when we're talking about religion, certain things that you're going to do, within your culture when the baby's born, and having those conversations, because that's when I have found in my work that in-laws can definitely feel like it's the other party that is convincing their child not to do something. And so if you get out ahead of it, it's very, very helpful. So even sitting down and making a list, I have this on my website of like all the traditions in your family that you had as a kid growing up. How did they make you feel? Did you like them? Do you want to continue them? And then finding a way to put them together. And there are some traditions that even I maintain that are important to my family. I don't really care about them, but they make other people feel good and they're of no harm to me. And so there are also those types of traditions that you can maintain for like the greater continuity of your family as well.
That was beautiful. I don't have anything to add.
We love when that happens.
Love it.
Okay, so we have about 12 minutes left. So anybody who has a boundary specific topic or just any kind of relationship topic or question to ask, put it in the chat. We did get a couple I got a couple in my Augie DMs. So I'll ask this question in the chat and then I'll get to some of those too. How can you set a healthy boundary in a marriage when extended family tends to be very involved? Sometimes it feels like my partner automatically agrees to family plans, or I hear that, or prioritizes their input without checking in with me first. I want to feel like a team, but I'm not sure how to bring it up without causing tension or sounding like I'm trying to create distance between him and his family during the holidays or shopping trips. My husband tends to focus mostly on his mom. He shows her what he's trying on, often overlooks my opinions, and once even told a store clerk that he was looking for his mom while I was standing right there. When it's time for us to leave, she sometimes says her stomach hurts or cries, which clearly makes him and me feel guilty. I do take into consideration that his dad passed away 2 years ago. That's so hard. But our dynamic doesn't feel like a couple or marriage that stands on its own apart from his family.
Liz, go ahead if you want to take this one first.
And this one's really challenging. It sounds like there's a lot going on between is it your husband, your spouse, husband, that your husband is maybe trying to navigate regarding like his role in his family of origin, maybe kind of really doubled down on the loss of his dad, and then his role with you. It sounds like from what I'm reading that there's certain things that he sees as being like a mom thing. So like shop like things maybe he did with his mom when he was growing up, and kind of maybe not seeing that as like a spouse thing that are coming up for him. My guess is that there's like maybe a lot of internal work that he needs to do related to like, who am I as a child versus who am I as a spouse, and what are my obligations to my mom who cries if I'm not around, who's also grieving, who's also alone. And it sounds like you have empathy for that. With that being said, it's very clear from this, and I could be wrong, I haven't met with the two of you, but just from reading this, that there hasn't really been what's called like a couple bubble created around the two of you. And so it's like a little bit confusing, like which family am I in? So when people become married partners, what's really important is that they see themselves as the primary family. So it's you and your spouse, and if you have children, your children, and that's the family. And then your in-laws and your parents and your siblings and all of that, they are kind of outside of this bubble. And so the primary is when I'm scheduling, when I'm making decisions, it happens first within this primary family, and then it can go outside. So me and my spouse, we talk about holidays and how they're going to look. And then after we do that, we can chat with, our mother, our sister, our brother, our dad, whoever, about what they might like as well. But it needs to be primarily this. And what I'm reading from your thing, from what you wrote, is that it doesn't feel like you're primary. It feels like everyone else is primary, and then you're kind of being led into whatever's happening. And so it's really important that there's this kind of maybe like sit down between you and your partner of, hey, we're married now, which means we are the family. We are the nuclear family, you and I. And so we're primary, and then everybody else, which can be a grieving process, it can be hard, they're outside of that bubble. So what are we going to do as a unit to reprioritize all of this? And you're the one asking the question, but it's hard because that takes your partner having a willingness to do that. I don't know if your partner has that willingness. Hopefully they do. I find that people usually do. People often just actually don't know that concept. They get married, they just dive into things, and they don't realize that there needed to be kind of a shift. And so sometimes that conversation can really help. Whitney, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm thinking of, I'm gonna put it in the chat. I was just looking for it. I recorded a podcast episode called like What's Going On with All the Boy Moms, and I have two sons, like no hate to the boy
I
moms,
know,
but
I'm always like, am I a boy mom?
yeah, I know. I like to say I'm a mom of boys, not a boy
Mm-hmm.
mom. I think that gets negative attention these days, but I not specific to this person who's writing the question because I don't know your situation, but there can certainly be a lot of issues where sons can move into the position of spouse with their mothers. And it becomes very tricky for the wife because the boy is looked to as someone who's there to provide emotional comfort, self esteem, be a protector. And I find that a lot of times when this happens, even after there's been a death in the family, it's been an existing dynamic that's been there for a long time. It can happen a lot where there's divorce, where the spouse is working a lot, where there's been infidelity. So this episode might be interesting to you because I go in, I'm pretty sure this one I go into some research on that. That might be something even for a spouse in that situation to kind of look at is like, how did my mom treat me throughout my whole life based on my gender in the family, as being a son.
Yeah. Yeah, really good advice. Um, my mother-in-law has become really intense starting around my third trimester, wants to be very involved, constantly asking for visits to see the baby, asking my husband constantly for photos. This feels like a massive shift in how our relationship was prior to our baby. How do I navigate what seems to be her demanding a new type of relationship while I'm also postpartum? To be clear, her focus is on the baby, not on helping us as new parents, and it's making me feel like I'm responsible for satisfying her emotional needs.
So hard and so common, right? To
Mm-hmm.
feel like I think babies make families freak out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's role is shifting in the family. They want to make sure that they have their place. Anyone newly postpartum, I really think it's best for you to give up on pleasing anyone, making anyone the center of your
Mm-hmm.
world. I've watched too many people, including myself at times, try to do that, right? And it's just not possible. I
Mm-hmm.
also think anyone who is putting those kinds of demands on you postpartum likely doesn't have a lot of insight. And it might be difficult for you to please them regardless. This is also a time I would say have your partner step in and help with some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Again, I'm like a broken record with these types of things. It really needs to be your partner.
Mm-hmm.
So anything you can do to get them on board, avoiding criticism, right? Like the more that you say something like your mom is crazy or she's, so ridiculous, the more shut down you're going to get from your partner, or criticizing them. Like Whitney was saying, I find that when children are introduced into the family, everybody goes a little wild. All people, like, I'm thinking of my own, even myself. I look back and I'm like, why did I perceive it that way? And so I also recommend like taking a pause and you yourself taking care of like you need to take care of yourself right now. Like Whitney was saying, don't put a ton of pressure on yourself to have to please anybody, and letting your partner know the one thing I really need from you right now is to be the buffer. And here's why I need that. Talk about why. I need to be able to rest. I need to be able to bond with the baby. This is going to be this is really important for me, for my healing, my well-being. It would mean a lot to me if you would convey X, Y, and Z. Whenever I'm meeting with people who are about to have a baby, sometimes I get lucky enough that I'm meeting with a couple before the baby's born. I always tell the spouse, it's so incredibly important that you are ready to have these conversations, because I find that very difficult to move pain between couples happens postpartum. I meet with so many couples where they are still hurt 6 years later because the husband wouldn't just tell his mom, hey, you can only come by on Saturdays. Please stop asking. If they would have only had that conversation, so much conflict would have been avoided. And so I talk a lot with the spouse about how important it is just to be prepared. Like the sooner you can have these conversations, not only does it get resolved with your parent, but the sooner your partner is going to see how strongly you have your back or their back. And that is what really, really, really matters. And so in this case, what's most important is like, you don't need to please anybody. And you're telling your partner, this is what I need from you. And that they're able to act on that.
Yeah, such good advice. We only have a couple minutes, so we'll try to get through as many as we can. How do you deal with your in-laws treating your spouse's siblings, kids / spouses differently? Understand that everyone's family situations are so different, but how do you reconcile our feelings and the reception of those different reactions?
I think the first thing I would want to do is just again get curious about like, have you noticed that whatever specific evidence you have of this dynamic, like whether it's in gift giving, how much time is spent, how they speak about them, trying to get clear on what the difference is. I think that can also be very important for you to make sure that you're seeing it and you can actually quantify it, not that it just kind of feels that way. And then talking with your partner about that. Like I've noticed that we usually do this with these kids, but not with these kids. Have you noticed that that's coming up?
I agree. Lead with curiosity.
Yeah. Good advice. How do you deal with parents, they're mine, not my in-laws, who live locally and expect lots of time with you and the baby when those people are challenging personalities who don't feel necessarily relaxing to be around?
Go ahead, Liz. You can take this one first.
Well, my first question would be, how do you want to deal with them? I can't tell you how to deal with them because it's your own family. So if you're saying, I don't want them to be around as often, and these are my parents, it might be really challenging, but you've got to share that with them directly. And again, like Whitney was talking about earlier, it doesn't need to be aggressive. It can come from a place of kindness. It could even be brief, but just saying something like, we are so, so busy and the kids love you, or whatever, something kind. They want to be connected. And right now is just such a busy time for us. What we've decided, or what I've decided, whichever one feels more comfortable to you, is that we really need advance notice, or that right now we're only doing visits on Saturdays, or that right now we're only able to have visits when both of us are home, or there's lots of birthday parties we have to go to on the weekends. The weekends don't work anymore, but we're going to plan a Sunday dinner. I suggest that you come up with like, what is your alternative? So if they want all of this time, just thinking through, okay, my answer to that is no, I can't have all of this time. And this is what I can offer instead. So what can you offer that you would feel comfortable with? It's hard for people if you just say, hey, all the time, it's too much, we just can't do that much. Then they don't really know what to do with the energy. But if you can say to yourself, what I feel comfortable with is that we have a family dinner once a month or once a week, or like whatever works for you, then you share that. We can't do this many visits. What we can do though is let's the first Sunday of every month get together. Or what we can do is we can meet up at the playground and take a walk with you. Let's say you just want limited time. Make the suggestion of what that could look like. Maybe you don't have them to the house. Maybe you say, let's meet up for lunch. Let's take a walk around the park. And that way you can extricate yourself. But you will have to let them know, we can't do this many visits. And this is what we can do. Whitney, do you have any other thoughts?
No, I think that's perfect. I agree that focusing on what you can do is very important, and not just saying we can't do it. And then, sometimes I've seen cases where the parent escalates, they become quite demanding and they say, no, you have to see us. And then, of course, you might need a little bit more of a strict boundary.
Yeah, for sure. I want to be mindful of everybody's time, but a couple people liked this question, so I want to make sure we get to it, and then I will let everybody go on with their day. How do you maintain empathy for your spouse who struggles with enmeshment with his emotionally immature parents, which has led to you being scapegoated by the whole family. I feel betrayed. My husband is much better at recognizing his dynamic with his family, but struggles to hold boundaries with them. I feel like his family programming runs so deep. He intellectually gets it, but struggles to change his behavior.
Yeah, to answer like the core question of holding empathy for them, I think it's helpful to view them as a child that experienced a lot of this and remember that this didn't start now. They used to be a little kid that was dependent on these people for survival and emotional closeness and all of that. And so what you're seeing today is so many decades of that, and looking at them as that little kid version of them can evoke that feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think also, just from reading your question, it sounds like you are saying my husband does see it, just struggles to sometimes do it. And I find that that can help if you can keep going back to like, they do see it. They aren't like fighting me on it, the reality of it, because that's really very damaging, right? When you have a partner that's like, no, I just don't see it, or I don't want to see it. Sometimes if you can lean into like, okay, this is like deep conditioning, they do see it, they are trying, this is not going to change overnight, and just repeating that to yourself whenever you become upset, which you have every right to feel, can sometimes help you tap into that empathy, and also extending compassion to yourself. So, and I see all of these things, and it's completely fair that I'm overwhelmed and feel betrayed and hurt by this. Because I think if we're gentle with ourselves, then we can also be gentle with other people.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Everything you guys said has been so enlightening. So thank you so much for your time and for your extra time and for answering all of our questions. This was such a wonderful event. Boundaries are about clarity, not confrontation, and we've come away with so many takeaways. So I hope everybody got what they wanted out of this event. This was so wonderful. So look for Liz at Liz Listens and Whitney at Sit with Wit on Instagram. And thank you guys so much. Your insights were wonderful, and this was a great conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bye,
Thank you guys. Have a
everybody.
great day. Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.